I am Jamie Shropshire, and I'm an alcoholic. I'm also an attorney, recently retired. My sobriety date is January 1st, 1986. So I just celebrated 32 years of sobriety. I'm going to share a little bit of my story, not because I'm important, although, in my own head, I'm more important than anybody else. But just because over that 32 years, I've talked to hundreds of alcoholics. What happened in my life is extremely typical. The trauma that occurred in my life is pretty typical. And some of the women that I deal with, my trauma was nothing compared to theirs. I came by my alcoholism honestly. My dad was an alcoholic. I think my grandfather was an alcoholic. My father was not one of those alcoholics who stumbled or slurred their words. In fact, I never heard him slur his words or stumble or fall. But when he drank, he got very, very mean. He beat my mother probably every night of their married life that I recall. In the last year of my mother's marriage to my dad, they were married for 17 years. I was 13 when they got divorced. He tried to kill her 7 times that I remember. He threw her naked through a plate glass window. He tried to strangle her. He tried to smother her with a pillow. He tried to drown her in the bathtub. He drove her around town with a gun to her head. That's what life was like in my house. And my brother and I at the time didn't know it was different. We had no comparison to anybody else's life. We thought that's just how everybody lived. We would bet on who was going to end up with the most scars in the morning when you got up to go to breakfast. My mom, after 17 years of that, decided to get a divorce. My dad collected guns. My brother and I thought we had taken all the guns out of the house. He came back one night, walked down the hall, and for some reason I knew exactly what he was going to do. He found a gun. He went out to the living room and where my mom was, and he said, if I can't live with you, I won't live without you, and he shot himself. I was 13. We were all in the house. I had just taken junior high school first aid, and I thought I ought to be able to stop the bleeding. And I blamed myself for my father's death for almost 25 years until I found a very kind and loving psychologist who helped me through it. Now that's how I got my alcoholism. 77% chance of becoming an alcoholic and prolonged stress. I listened to a neurologist speak, actually in Boise one time, and he said, I can give you the formula almost 100% for an alcoholic. First, some genetic predisposition. Second, prolonged chronic untreated stress. He said the end of that is almost 100% alcoholic or addict. If you're an alcoholic, you're not alone in the world. I'm going to give you some statistics from the World Health Organization. They were just updated in 2015, but I think some of these were really from about 2012. We spend millions and millions and millions of dollars trying to treat drug addiction in this country and around the world. But here are the statistics. 3.3 million people die every year in the world of alcohol-related either disease or accident, injury, something associated with alcoholism. That's about 6% of all deaths worldwide attributable to alcoholism. Unfortunately, most of the people that die at an early age. The largest percentage, 25%, are between the ages of 20 and 39 years old. Alcoholism accounts for a little over 5% of the burden of worldwide of all disease and injury. And as we've talked about today, it's a significant cause of social and economic impact. There are at least 60 different types of diseases which have alcohol as a significant causal role. So in the United States, all deaths from alcohol are somewhere between 2 to 4.9%, depending on where you measure it. Worldwide, 69,000 people die of opioid addiction every year. That's about 2% of the number of people that die from alcoholism. And the opioid deaths are the only ones that I was able to find through World Health Organization. I'm sure there are other deaths from other kinds of drugs, but that's the one we track now because of the big opioid contest. It's nothing compared to the number of people who die from alcohol-related illnesses. Lawyers, somewhere between 21 and 30%, depending on who you ask and who the survey was done. General population, I mean, statistically, they say it's 7 to 10%. But it could be higher. It could be the 16% you talked about. Students entering law school, they generally enter law school with the likelihood of being an alcoholic that is consistent with the general population, 7 to 10%. By the end of their second year, they're at the 21 to 30% rate that all lawyers face. So as a profession, we have a great, unfortunately, a high likelihood of becoming an alcoholic. Those statistics are based on, there's another interesting statistic that goes with those. When they did their analysis, they were somehow able to ascertain the percentage of adults who abstained from alcohol in the past 12 months. And it was 62%, so very much like your study, 70. So 62% of the population didn't have any alcohol in the last 12 months. Those of us who are drinking a lot of it. You've heard a lot of symptoms of alcoholism from people who are well qualified to give them. The symptoms that you'll get from an alcoholic, you talk to an alcoholic, denial. I'm not really an alcoholic. I just, I drink too much occasionally. And it's, it's like Suzanne said, when you ask them how much do you drink, is that you bring home a 6-pack or a case a night, or I can tell you at the end of my drinking career, and I was one of those alcoholics who had to have a certain amount of alcohol in her system all the time just to function. At the end of my drinking career, in late 1985, I was drinking half a gallon of vodka a day, and if I didn't pass out from that, I drank some of that almond wine in those lovely bottles they used to come in. And if I hadn't passed out then, I'd drink NyQuil, because NyQuil will put me to sleep, and it's 60% alcohol. That was where I lived in 1985. And it's amazing that my liver survived at all from any of that. So denial. But I really, at that point, knew I was an alcoholic. I just thought, my brain I've always been able to solve all of my problems. I was smart enough to get through law school. I graduated in 1983, passed the California bar, was admitted to the California bar in 1983. If I could do that, I ought to be able to solve my alcoholic problem. That's what my brain told me. Unfortunately, my brain kept me drinking a lot longer than I should have. And the other kinds of symptoms that an alcoholic could tell you about are lying, cheating, stealing, remorse, and incredibly bad relationship skills. We have a saying in my 12-step program, the alcoholics don't have relationships, we take hostages. Now that's, when you go to your doctor with this kind of ill-at-ease feeling, and the only thing you can describe are those kinds of things, they can't put a Band-Aid on. Doctors are notoriously bad at trying to deal with alcoholics because they don't know what to do. Now, fortunately, more and more, they've heard of a 12-step program. They've heard of some of the tests and things that you can do, and hopefully they're relying on people like Suzanne to deal with. But, and most of the time, an alcoholic's lying to their doctor. How much did you have to drink? I was never honest with my doctor. How much do you drink? A couple a day. Well, if a couple is a gallon, that was, 2.5 gallons. That's what I was drinking. So, and that's part of the problem that we just, we are incapable of being honest with the medical profession about what we do. And the medical profession, unfortunately, they spend about as much time on teaching how to deal with alcoholics as they do on teaching how to deal with dengue fever, which I don't think even exists in the United States anymore, which is about a half a day on something that affects a huge proportion of their population. I'd like to read you something from a doctor in the 1930s who tried to treat alcoholics and got to the point where he realized you're either going to die, you're going to go to jail, or you're going to go to an insane asylum, because there was nothing the medical profession could do to treat alcoholics. Maybe the best description of an alcoholic I've ever read. This is Dr. Silkworth. Men and women drink essentially because they like the effect produced by alcohol. The sensation is so elusive that, while they admit it is injurious, they cannot, after a time, differentiate the true from the false. To them, their alcoholic life seems the only normal one. They are restless, irritable, and discontented unless they can again experience the sense of ease and comfort which comes at once by taking a few drinks which they see others take with impunity. After they have succumbed to the desire again, as so many do, and the phenomena of craving develops, they pass through the well-known stages of spree, emerging remorseful, with a firm resolution not to drink again. And this is repeated over and over. Unless this person can experience an entire psychic change, there's very little hope of that person's recovery. That's what it's like to be an alcoholic. Spree and remorse, spree and remorse. A little bit about, because what we're here today to try and do is to help you if you've got a call, or if you're on the committee, you're dealing with somebody who's an alcoholic, or if you see somebody who's having some problems and you don't really know what kind of category to put it in. We have the manual, which is very useful, but some of the things from the manual to look for are, that person is late for work or they don't show up at all. They've had the flu like 30 times in the last year. That's usually the favorite excuse, that I must have the flu. They miss appointments or they miss court dates. They fail to stay in contact with their clients or colleagues. They isolate. They have incomplete work. They leave early. They headed to the bar. They avoid colleagues and clients. And in my case, I went through all of that. I actually drank for 3 years of practice before I got sober. And so I went through all of those things. But I wasn't really associated with a firm, and so I got away with a lot of it. I could just simply slip in and out. I'd start drinking at 8 in the morning and go back to the bar at 10, go back at noon, go back at 2, because remember, I had to have all that alcohol, a certain amount of alcohol in my system all day long. And then usually after the 2 o'clock stint, I couldn't make it back. But I got sober because a psychologist who I was going to, I went to the psychologist to try to deal with my dad's suicide. And I would go once a week. I'd pay whatever money it was I had to pay religiously, and I would show up drunk. And he'd say, I can help you with the stuff that goes on through Dad, but you need to go to AA, you need to get sober. And I'd say, okay. And I had no idea what any kind of 12-step program was at the time. And I'd go back next week, I'd be drunk, and he'd say, I can help you with this stuff, but you really have to stay sober. And that went on probably for at least a year before I crawled into his office one day, into the corner, and I said, that's it. I'm too chicken to kill myself, and I don't know how to stay alive, and I'm dying because I can't stop drinking. He sent me to a detox center across the street, so I was in detox for 3 days, and then on to a 12-step program. And I am eternally grateful to that guy. And he wasn't an alcoholic, but he knew how to deal with it. So a little bit about, again, if you're dealing with, I'm going to talk a little bit about 12-step programs in a minute, but in our brochure, if you're talking to somebody and you can get them to take a look at their brochure and the cage questions, there's only 4. Real simple. Look at the cage questions. Have you ever felt the need to cut down on your drinking? Have you ever been annoyed by criticism of your drinking? Now, that's the one that'll get to all alcoholics. We will turn and walk away from somebody as opposed to being confronted by our alcoholism. Have you ever felt guilty about your drinking? Yeah, the next morning, always. And have you ever had a morning eye-opener? When I was drinking, I thought I was okay because I never had to drink in the morning until like the last 2 or 3 years of my drinking. And I thought, well, I'm okay. Until one day I took that drink at 8 o'clock and I knew that was it. I wasn't going to be able to function on any day without alcohol in my system. Those are real helpful. Those are in our brochure. They're online. And they're pretty simple questions if you can get somebody to sit down and just talk to you about it. So I got, as I said, I got sober in a 12-step program. One of the reasons that 12-step programs work are exactly what Suzanne was trying to tell us. They emphasize service to others. Alcoholics helping each other. or addicts helping each other. We get sponsors, we talk to each other, we go to meetings, and also there's a sense of getting rid of the selfishness that addicts and alcoholics have. When we say it's all about me, when we're drinking and using, we really mean it. It's all about us. It's where I would have walked over, around, and through you to get to the next drink. And it didn't matter if you were my mother or somebody I didn't know. That's how important alcohol was to my life. It took the place of, you know, that Maslow's list of things that are important in your life. It took the place of the very highest things in my life. How do I preserve my life? My family, my friends, just living. Alcohol went to the top of that list every single day. We also talk about acceptance in 12-step programs. One of the things that lowers your stress level, if you can get to the point of understanding that people, places, and things are just going to be what they are. You can't change them. You know, we go through our lives thinking that if I just, especially as attorneys, if I just argue a little longer, you know, if I just say the right words, if I just annoy the judge one more time, you know, I can change somebody's mind. I still have that problem a lot, but as attorneys, that's really a prevalent kind of thing. If I just keep talking, maybe I'm going to change that person. Maybe I'll change the situation. Maybe I'll convince the judge or the administrative hearing officer that I'm right, that my client is right. And sometimes, at least if you're an alcoholic in your life, if you can accept that people, places, and things are going to be what they are. The only thing I have control of is how I react or interact with them. As an attorney, how do I present my case? How do I best serve my client? Instead of feeding my ego, what do I have to do that's in the best interest of my clients? And sometimes best interest of my clients is settle. Sometimes it's just simply accepting that it's the situation you're in. But we are in such a confrontational profession that it's difficult to do sometimes. But that's one of the things that a 12-step program helps people to understand. And it has a tendency to lower your stress and anxiety, and you lower your stress and anxiety, then you can start to begin to work on recovering. And we reinforce that what you have is a disease, not a moral dilemma. You know, my mother used to say to me, why don't you just stop drinking? And it's like, oh, like I never thought of that. I thought of that every single moment of my life. Why couldn't I just stop drinking? And I would watch other people. Yeah, my mother was one of those, you know. You'd have a glass of wine, she'd drink half of it and leave it on the table. That was alcohol abuse to me. That's what I thought was alcohol. You're leaving half of your drink. And if you're in a room of alcoholics, it won't be there long, don't worry. But, you know, she was not an alcoholic and she couldn't understand. And you know, you'd think she was married to an alcoholic for 17 years, she'd understand. She never understood what it was like to be an alcoholic. It's as difficult as a diabetic trying to describe to you what it's like to be a diabetic. It's just how it is. And all we can try and do as alcoholics is let you know, here's what I'm going through, here's what I need. I don't need somebody to tell me it's okay, you'll get better, or, you know, just people you say, well, just cut down, you know, try one drink a day. I never had one drink in my entire life. I don't know what that is. If I was going out to a party, I'd drink enough ahead of time so that I wouldn't make a fool of myself when I got to the party by drinking too much. Because I had to have that level of alcohol in my system all the time. And trust me, there are people in the profession that you will see every day that are exactly like me. They're not any different. Some of them hide it better. And it's kind of like, you know, dementia. You can hide it for 15 years. I did pretty well for maybe 15, but by the end of the 20 years, I wasn't hiding it. I was simply, that's all I was doing, was drinking. So, hopefully you have gained something here today, some insight. Hopefully you'll be able to better serve the clients and the people that we deal with. And especially those members of the committee that are here, I really appreciate your coming. And to our speakers. And we will, we're going to adjourn almost an hour ahead of time. Does anybody have any questions at all before we leave? All right, thank you again.